So I'm going to talk about a small experience that we had in the neuro ICU that we just moved into. There are three about minute and a half long videos in it with some audio, and I wanted to forewarn you ahead of time. That's a real lifetime simulation experience, so we'll give you almost the first outlook of what we experienced. And one of the simulations will actually have some funny things where you see how things can go wrong, and you'd rather have them go wrong in a simulation rather than go wrong in real life. So most of the things in the ICU that we deal on a daily basis are either things that are camouflaged in our workflow, whether it's patient care issues, administrative issues, safety issues. If you really focus hard, you can find these problems and catch them. Some issues in ICU are problems that face us straight ahead, but they catch us off guard at times when we're not watching our back or not quite attentive. So simulation has kind of become the go-to place for testing out these scenarios in a real-life environment rather than making our patients and providers make them learn these, or pick up these errors in real life. So about 2 years back, we decided that we need, because of expanding volumes, a brand new ICU. So we built a 24-bed ICU to accommodate our increasing clinical volumes. It was designed over 2 years, and there were monthly meetings with lots of feedback from the providers, from patients, from families, and pretty much everybody else who had anything to advise us on based on their past experiences. So lots of effort went into designing this ICU. Because it was built in 2016, it had all the latest technology, spatial orientation, feng shui, the latest ICU codes mandated by the Department of Health, and obviously the latest gadgets in monitoring ICU equipment. So to give you a perspective of what it looked like, this is our old ICU, an open bay unit where 3 patients were separated by curtains. It actually looks more spacious in this photograph because there are no patients in there. But if you put in 3 patients, 2 curtains, a CRRT machine in one patient, a ventilator in the other, and a continuous EG machine, you can see how much wire hazard it creates and how much wiggle room is there to walk around. Compared to this ICU that we moved into, where each patient has an individual room, which is pretty spacious, and I'll show you an inside view of this room. So open bay unit moved to a closed bed unit. It's about half the size of a football field, 1/4 of a mile around if you go from room number 1 to room number 24, compared to our previous ICU where you could stand at one place and see all 11 beds together. So for nurses especially, it was very easy to have lunch breaks because one nurse could literally watch all patients while the other nurses would go on a break. And this photograph that I showed you represents only this segment of the ICU. The inside room, this is our old room, and actually one of the most well-lit rooms with a natural window. You can see one of my patients who's delirious and doing yoga splits in bed, but it'll give you an idea of the space around the room, and try to imagine the space with a CRRT machine or a ventilator or a continuous EG machine, and what a space hazard it creates and doesn't quite allow the patients or their families. We have 24/7 open visitation in the ICU, but because of space constraints, we're not able to offer them seating. So we actually offer them a picnic chair that is portable anytime a family member comes and visits, and there's limit to 1 chair per family member. So if 2 people visit, another person has to stand, which I think is almost inhumane. Compared to our new ICU, where this is a staged ICU with a mannequin, there's a couch at the back that converts to a bed at night. We are encouraging family presence in the ICU 24/7, as well as family participation in nursing protocols. There's a shower attached to each room. So my 24-bed ICU has 24 showers, plus 3 for the call rooms, and 2 booms that move about 270 degrees, and there is no attachment to the walls. Each of these booms are completely independently sufficient in wiring, electronics, gases, lines, or anything the patient needs. So if one boom decides to malfunction, the second boom can 100% provide all the patient care needs for that patient. We are also blessed with Center of Applied Learning that runs a simulation lab, and This is Jeff Carter. He's the medical director of our lab, an immense mentor and a huge resource for our facilities. We pretty much run simulations for anything that can have a perspective in medical simulation. It's integrated into our residency, critical care fellow, nurse practitioner, nursing curriculum. We do on-site simulations like mock airway codes, and we do mock OR simulations in a mock OR that is staged 24/7 and have really shown good outcomes based on that. So I'm very grateful for the support we had from our Center of Applied Learning. So because of the angst of a new ICU, new culture, new technology, the staff basically expressed dissatisfaction. We had moved to an electronic medical record system a year before this ICU was built, so there was lots of anxiety, especially in the relatively senior generation, that they had just gotten used to a complete electronic system, and now they were being exposed to a whole new different modern technology. Our previous experiences with an ICU we built about 6 years back had shown very high levels of turnover, loss of staff, especially senior nursing staff around the time the ICU was built. So based on that, we tried to develop a program based on nursing request to create a simulation program that would help us train ICU providers to this new environment and make them comfortable. The way it was planned initially to 6 months later, how it was implemented, was about 24 different drafts, and lots of work and mind went into it, but I'll give you a perspective of what we ended up implementing. So the three major things that we wanted was, one, test the new patient care environment and make sure there are no patient care safety issues from geographical, provider, workflow, ergonomic perspective, and communicate those corrective action plans if we can come up with some back to the people who are responsible for instituting them, and as a matter of the whole process, train all providers in the new environment, make them comfortable. So the three-stage process, stage one was a self-directed checklist, almost like a treasure hunt. Stage two, we tried to simulate workflow in one single patient room, how things move in a worst-case scenario. Stage three, we ran 4 different rooms with parallel and serial scenarios in series that emulated a busy day in the ICU, and we tested the environment of the ICU in physicality as well as the electronic cloud. If you work in a large medical center, you probably know that there's an electronic cloud that has all the electronic systems that connect pharmacy, triage, bed allotment, and lots of work goes in this electronic cloud that you need to have a label to attach. So if you're not recognized in that environment, things won't flow smoothly. So it was both the electronic presence of the ICU in the new system, the new ICU in the existing systems, as well as the physicality of how things move. So we tried to emulate a real day in the life of a neuro ICU. People who participated in these were real-life providers, anybody who had a stake in the unit, anybody who had any part in the workflow of the unit, whether it was environmental services, infection prevention, gave input into designing the simulation program. They were part of the team that observed the simulation program. So there were participants that participated in the simulation, and there was a whole team that comprised of every single department that had any stake in the ICU and were the observers and had a checklist of their own for feedback. The simulation was carried out with 2 high-fidelity simulator mannequins, and actors were sought that were standardized patients. And the real-life providers basically provided participation in real-life roles. So stage 1, everybody was given a checklist, which was provider-specific. Nursing had a different checklist, respiratory therapy different, neurosurgeons different. And what you were supposed to do was find stuff yourself on this checklist, orient yourself, and to make sure that people are not just checking off things without actually going there. We had prizes for people, and there were trick questions and labels on labels attached to check that you actually went there and checked that stuff out. And people really liked the treasure hunt aspect of it, and there were like candies hidden behind monitors and little things that we wanted people to discover. We gave them a geographical map of the unit with specific locations based on their specialty. So if it was nurses, they had to go and look for the MAR and the PICSs to retrieve medications. And one room was completely staged with all equipment to make sure that they can actually find stuff in a real-life scenario. Stage 2, we basically took one patient room, put a mannequin in there as if there was a new patient admission, and this was the first time where the patient room was tested in a real-life environment once everybody had been trained with stage 1 simulation. So everybody that you're going to see a video in the next slide of the simulation that we conducted. You will see a consultant, a respiratory therapist, and nursing staff that are basically trying to hook on a patient that got admitted from the ED, and as they're trying to hook the patient onto telemetry, things are going wrong, and patient starts desatting, and you will see the frantic responses of people. With due respect to all my colleagues, these are my real colleagues. I do want to say, please don't be judgmental of their responses. We are human beings. The simulation was actually, this was the most priceful aspect of it, that despite training, despite us being full professionals who worked in the ICU, none of these were naive ICU providers. When you're put in a new environment with new ergonomics, new acoustics, that's human nature to take some time to adapt to it. So every fallacy that you see here was the reason why the simulation program was made, to help them adapt to this new environment and learn the memory steps that we thought people would have no problems understanding, but we understood based on this simulation response that these are the things that have to be taught or people need to be made aware about when moving into this new ICU. It's a little loud, so we'll try to see if the audio works. If you want to play the video, sir. So again, for seasoned providers, one thing you will notice is, as things are going wrong, the nurses couldn't figure out how to find cables to attach to the monitors. The consultant is standing there trying not to help anybody. The patient's pulse oximetry was last dropping, and nobody knows what to do. Respiratory therapist is frantically running for airway equipment that they should have already been trained where to find it. So that was a pretty humbling experience to watch this, and we are all watching from outside, about 17 people, and taking notes about things that could go wrong. And this actually went on for about 20 minutes before we really made it hurt, before we really let every system fail. But one thing we noticed was everybody was frantic, and the stage 1 was just not enough for us to train people. So it was humbling to know that, and really gave us support for all the inspiration for all the effort that went into it. So stage 3 was basically doing the same thing, but in 4 scenarios, and we emulated the functional workflows, and every single system went live for this exercise as it would. So a patient started from the ED, came to the ICU. We created a test patient. So every system was activated for this patient exactly how it would be activated and would recognize that particular patient. So we had 4 scenarios that typically represent our own population. So we didn't come up with any random 4 scenarios. These are the kind of patients we actually see on a daily basis. And we also wanted to nail down the clinical scenarios that are very high stakes. So these are the things that we know can actually be missed, and if they get missed, they will result in a huge safety issue, patient satisfaction, provider satisfaction if we were to miss that scenario. A very detailed checklist of things that had to be instituted in a part of it and tested as a part of it. We let the scenario run haywire exactly how it wants to, but these are the things where the coordinators, me and Jeff Carter, would basically come in and make sure that particular aspect was tested. So we're going to show you 2 more videos. One is a patient that had just been admitted from the ED, that's scenario number 1. There was a neuro change compared to the sign-off that was given. And the second scenario is a patient who starts seizing, and there's a family member present. So family presence in the ICU 24/7 was something new for us, and that was part of the scenario to teach nurses how to handle if a patient goes haywire when the family is being disruptive in the patient's care. So you want to start? If you want to go to the next slide, please. So if you notice this slide, you will see me yelling out stuff like, did the order come through? And the RT saying, the order didn't come through. So we were testing multiple parallel things in tandem as a real scenario was going on. If you would go out over the next slide, please. So this was a scenario with a patient who's actively seizing, and the family is disruptive. And basically, we ran the whole scenario with Ativan being brought from the PICSs, the continuous EEG being brought and hooked on to check the wireless system. So pretty much every aspect of that was checked. And this was the post debriefing after each scenario. So they were planned in series, so one occurred after the other. But as the debriefing of one is going on, we'll start rolling out the next scenario to catch providers off guard. In these debriefings, everybody was freely allowed to write or speak up their feedback, and we got extensive feedback. I have about 5 pages of every tiddly-biddly issue I would never even imagine would come up, and the kind of things that we thought had thought through in the last 2 years, but really didn't. We also took independent feedback about their experience, and the experience was unanimously positive, which was very reassuring and actually humbling for all the effort that went into the scenario. As a close-up, we found 3 things that I'm going to share with you, small things that we never thought would ever come up. So we have 2 booms in each room, and that's completely sufficient. But based on the workflow that we saw in the rooms, the near boom was assigned as the nursing boom, and the rear boom was assigned as the respiratory boom. So that's how the functional workflow is now separated. Everything respiratory goes to the boom close to the window, and everything nursing goes to the boom close to the door. A major safety issue we found out. You saw the picture of this hallway, and if you stand here and from the inside call for help, nobody can hear you. Acoustics that we would have never figured out. So each boom was equipped with a code blue button, which everybody had to be educated about. And then at the top of each door, an electronic system was set up where the light code would actually tell you what's needed inside. So green means there's a nursing assistance needed. So code blue means all light flashing. So we had to install that to deal with those acoustics. Because of the extensive amount of memory steps that had to be learned and new workflows that had to be created to adjust to this environment, we actually created an orientation manual. And I almost took out my microwave orientation manual and followed the steps. And this became available on every single computer station in the ICU, as well as was emailed to system-wide for any consultants visiting providers that come to the neuro ICU for their access. So we do think that this whole exercise created an impact. We learned new workflows we would have never anticipated unless we did the scenario, and we're very glad that we did. New memory steps that had to be trained. We encountered numerous patient safety issues that caught us off guard despite all the planning, and were able to correct before we actually moved into the ICU, and led to extreme provider satisfaction as well as orientation into this environment. Like everything else in life, you can rehearse all you want, you can prepare all you want. The simulation went awesome. We thought we fixed everything, but we still have had lots of oops moment in the ICU. On February 22nd, we celebrated our first-year anniversary, and basically sat down and went over all the things that need to be fixed that even this simulation program did not pick up. This is my awesome team. I could not have done it without them. It doesn't even represent a fraction of my team, but my nursing manager, and this is our Christmas card from this year. It was quite a year, but I think I love my team, and I'm grateful and honored to be working with these guys. The biggest humbling message for me for the whole experience was failure is the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. We are building a neonatal ICU now, so my whole team that was a part of the simulation program built up is actually going to help them carry out the whole simulation program again, but with the lessons we learned and even we failed to pick up in time. Thank you for your time.